We begin with the greatest danger to humanity. It's not those melons. It's this beast that's turning the helpless goblins into ground meat. A couple of days ago, a creature appeared from the frozen capsules in an old lab. It had sturdy arms, powerful legs, and a strong physique. The creature knew what it was, but lacked a name. Once, it had been a person called Unos. Now, Unos was a completely changed being. No longer able to speak any human language, Unos only recalled participating in a military gene-boosting program. At that time, he was simply a newcomer. Initially unsure, he found himself in a world torn apart by war, with nations battling throughout the continent. What surprised him now was the date shown on a nearby device, 1872, in the Northern Empire. He had joined the experiment at 18 years old in 1648. This meant he had been sleeping in the capsule for 22 to 24 years. As he glanced around, Yuno noticed a body in a nearby capsule. He stood quietly, trying to make sense of it all. His mind was buzzing with questions. Why had he remained unbothered for such a long time? What had become of the Fedic Empire? He also remembered his family, the ones he had left behind. Even though sadness weighed on him, he set those thoughts aside. Lacking evidence, he felt uncertain about everything. For the moment, Yunus chose to exit the building and explore what lay beyond. He strolled down the dim corridors, spotting more bodies lying about. As he moved, he came across a matchstick. As he went on, he faced a challenge. The gate was stuck. It looked like the place was out of power. However, he thought there must be some backup source, considering the capsule had kept him alive for such a long time. Yuno faced the heavy gate, feeling anxious. He understood that it was beyond his strength, even for someone like him to push it open. He soon noticed he had become a tough powerhouse. Intrigued by his newfound strength, he struck the gate with a punch. A loud crash rang out, and a sharp pain pierced his right arm. He fell to the ground, gripping it in distress, and cried out in pain. When he glanced at the gate once more, he gave it a thumbs up for remaining whole. It was a good thing for their homeland. Yunus had to search for a different escape route in the underground facility. The idea of being stuck and facing death there filled him with fear. He refused to stay a monster or face his doom in that spot. Angry, he struck the heavy gate with his fists and feet. Eventually, he paused. A surprising peace settled in, and his thoughts became sharper. He understood that the building was designed to contain beings like him and endure their chaos. If he continued, he was aware his limbs would fail long before the gate would. He began to think more deeply about how to get away. As he tightened his fists, a crucial memory came to him. After taking part in a gene-boosting experiment, he got an idea. He dug his sharp claws into a space in the gate and pulled. It opened. Out of nowhere, a loud bang echoed. Unos realized that the scientist's experiments had been successful. Using his newfound power, Unos smashed through a wall with one punch. He continued to break through walls until he discovered a chute. He used his claws and power to scale the wall, eager to escape. As Yuno walked outside, he felt lost and unsure of his surroundings. He chose to climb to a higher place to see the area more clearly. As he wandered, he discovered that his strength had grown, and his eyesight was clearer than ever. It felt like his eyes had a zoom feature, allowing him to see distant things with amazing sharpness. Despite his improved vision, all he could see from the cliff was an endless expanse of trees. He couldn't recall ever seeing a forest like this in the Empire. The idea of what could have occurred made him feel down. But he soon relaxed as if nothing was wrong. That's when Unos realized something else was different about him. He was holding back his feelings. This skill prevented him from experiencing anything that could disrupt his fighting. Right now, he saw its value, but he couldn't shake off the dread of its implications. The researchers had managed to transform people into tools of destruction. Still, Ununos chose his path. He leaped off the cliff, hitting the ground hard, and promised himself he would never be a tool for destruction. While exploring the area, he stumbled upon an airship that seemed to have crashed ages ago. Inside, everything was in ruins. During his search, he discovered a flight log and several letters from the northern kingdom of Canaan. The letters verified that the airship originated from Canaan. The records show that a creature attacked the airship, leading to its downfall. The most surprising detail is that these records date back 200 years. Unos exhaled deeply. This proved what he had already thought. Fortunately, he had gotten himself ready for these kinds of findings. The records showed that the airship went down 3 days after departing from Canaan. Based on how fast the airship was moving and how far it had gone, Unos had a general sense of his location. He wasn't hungry anymore, but he still nibbled on some stale biscuits he had discovered. He was concerned about losing his appetite, but chose to keep eating regularly for his well-being. He went outside and began walking toward the east. He recalled a village close by and wished to find people there. Even if it had been ruined, he figured he might uncover some helpful details. But if the village was still standing, he realized his frightening looks would cause trouble. As he moved along, he abruptly halted. A foul, tangy odor hung in the air, triggering an instinctive response in him. He quietly moved through the shrubs to discover where it was coming from. In a wide-open space, he saw goblins rejoicing over their treasures. He recognized them as the same goblins that mistreat female elves in hentai comics and shows. Ununos was a cultured man, much like you, our valued viewer. The overpowering scent made him feel nauseous. He felt pity for the pretend elves exploited by the goblins. Ununos tightened his fist and emerged from the bushes. He was aware that his body was powerful, nearly beyond human limits, but he questioned how it would fare against creatures like monsters. The goblins spotted him as he approached, exuding an intimidating presence. He swung his fist without a second thought, delivering a blow so strong it sent a shockwave through the air, taking down most of the goblins in an instant. As he kept battling, Unos came to a realization. This was more than just a fight. It was like he was turning their world into a nightmare. After the battle was over, Unos realized something important. He saw that goblins weren't strong beings, and the clash had become an unfair slaughter. Yet, he felt strangely captivated, as if he were immersed in a video game. However, when he noticed the blood on his claws, it became overwhelming for him. In a nearby village, a woman named Daera let out a sigh and asked a man named Lizelle if he had any money. Lizelle answered that finishing the job would boost her reputation, even if there was no actual prize. Daera grumbled that there was nothing interesting to discover nearby. Lizelle said sorry, but it was obvious he was preoccupied. Daera caught someone gazing at her chest and let out an exasperated sigh. She considered that she might have accepted his hug if he were a nicer guy. At that moment, Lizelle's sister, Lena, and a man named Gista came over. Lena inquired if Lizelle had checked out the nearby forest. Daera jumped in, saying she didn't want to hear Lizelle's excuses for venturing into the vast florist forest. Not long after, Daera and Lena find themselves under attack by goblins. Lizelle and Gista also fell victim to the goblins. Daera reflected on how everything had turned out poorly, and felt it was just her bad luck. The day before, Unos had battled a creature much larger than himself. With a single punch, he effortlessly took it down. He was more than just proving his power. He was hungry. He roasted the creature's flesh over a flame. When he took a bite, the taste was so awful that he immediately vomited. Feeling pity for the monster, he decided to bury it. He understood he had to let the blood out just like people do. He questioned if his taste buds were still human. Unos recalled the moment he transformed into a beast and could no longer speak like a human. Still, he chose to carry on with his life. He believed there was still a chance to become human once more and reunite with his sisters or their children. His family's lineage was powerful, and even if the empire crumbled, his sisters had to have made it through. Unos had come to terms with his new monster shape, realizing it wasn't as terrible as he expected. He felt sure about his abilities, but he was let down that he couldn't communicate in human speech. He was eager to connect with others. Unos had to carefully consider which country to relocate to if the empire truly collapsed. His home, the Futic Empire, was the biggest nation on Earth and boasted the most cutting-edge technology. Their scientific advancements were key to their survival against the four rival nations. A similar setting could be found in the northern land of Canaan. The Ainhel Republic was another great choice, as it was inhabited by elves who revered the natural world. Unos believed he could fit in with the monsters in nature, but he still had some concerns. He had heard that elves could use magic, and Ununos wasn't certain if he could withstand it. He also thought about whether elves had male counterparts, since he could only picture them as women. The southern land was off-limits for Unos for a number of reasons. The eastern realm of Caesarea was famous for its skilled monster hunters known as exterminators. In his present form, Unos would be an easy prey for them. Ununos chose to travel north to Canaan in search of a town to learn his location. He wished to avoid any encounters with the Caesareans. He soon understood that his words could be a warning sign. While Daera and her team were camping, she reminded them all that they were pest controllers. She wondered why they were taking advantage of things instead of going hunting. Lizelle told her to chill out. Lena recalled that they needed to search for something and return with it, though she couldn't quite remember what it was. At the same time, Gista voiced her annoyance about the elves seizing control of the old empire 5 years earlier without any consent. The group began to speculate whether the elves were on a quest for something, perhaps a secret treasure. Daera pointed out that the old empire only had items connected to science, which the other nations disapproved of. Noticing the serious faces around her, Lena joked that they resembled a group on a picnic. Lizelle quickly reminded her of the risks that came with their work. Daera nodded in agreement with Lena, describing her brother as heartless. She realized Lena was only trying to lighten the mood and said sorry for being too tough. Lena agreed it was okay. Daera complimented her looks and expressed her desire for Lena to be her little sister. Gista urged Lizelle to speak up, but Lizelle remained silent. Diara had no idea this would be their final moment of fun as a group. She had no idea they were so near to danger all this time. The following day, Lizelle was struck by a fireball, leaving everyone stunned. Lizelle was hurled into a rock and pinned down. Gister, caught off guard by Lizelle's fate, quickly found himself surrounded by goblins and restrained. He attempted to run away, but a fierce ogre showed up and smashed him. Lena felt helpless as she saw her brother and Jester get destroyed. Diara fought to remain brave, but she couldn't stop trembling in front of the goblin army commanded by the ogre. She had faced ogres and goblins in the past, but the devastated landscape left by the Empire made it even tougher. Diara aimed to shield Lena and launched a fire spell. However, a goblin swiftly countered her magic with a barrier that neutralized it. The shield used to belong to Lizelle, but the goblin snatched it. Diara understood that her magic was powerless, and they were in serious trouble. Out of nowhere, goblins jumped on Lena. Diara lost focus, and the other goblins seized the moment to strike her as well. The goblins began to take off the girl's clothes. Watching Lena scream for help filled Diara with guilt for not being able to save her. Frightened, the two girls exchanged glances. Rather than letting the goblins take charge, Diara resolved to take her own life by biting her tongue. A loud crash echoed as something unexpected emerged. Diara and the other goblins froze, wide-eyed at the sight of the creature that had just arrived. Unos stood tall in the center of the battlefield, leaving Diara curious about what kind of creature he was. As he scanned the area, he noticed the goblins creating chaos for Diara. The goblins grumbled about Unos wandering into their space, but Unos ignored them. He was focused on the melons right in front of him. He arrived because he caught the scent of goblins, but was surprised to see humans instead. Among the two men, he noticed that one was still breathing. He noticed another woman in the crowd. He complained about not being able to see her fruits and shoved the goblins that were pestering Lena. Diara was puzzled. She couldn't wrap her head around the idea that a monster was on their side. She questioned whether he was actually against the goblins. At that moment, she spotted the goblin shaman from before, weaving a spell. The shaman hurled a fireball at Unos, but it had no impact on him whatsoever. To Unos, it felt like a gentle tickle. He scanned the area, spotted the goblin shaman, and hurried over. He seized the shaman's head and smashed it like an apple. Diara, cradling Lena, was in shock that the fireball that had taken down Lizelle had no impact on this bizarre creature. Unos shifted his attention to the ogre that was guiding the goblins. He had missed it earlier, caught up in the melons around him. But now he realized the ogre could make a great training partner. Until that moment, Unos had only battled weaker creatures. It seemed like the ideal opportunity to challenge himself. The ogre lunged at Unos, swinging its massive wooden club toward his head. However, the hit didn't even leave a mark on him. Diara was taken aback, as it resembled the strike that had knocked Gista away. She understood that their current predicament was even more dire. Unos felt let down. He hit the ogre, sending it crashing into the foot of a cliff. Diara and the goblins stared in disbelief as blood gushed from the ogre like a fountain. Unos then jumped onto the ogre and pressed his foot against its face. Unos easily stomped on the ogre's head. Then he dealt with the rest of the goblins. The fight became a wild jumble. He even let out an adorable giggle as he wrapped things up. He glanced at the bear women, wishing they wouldn't be afraid of him now that they were out of danger. Tears filled his eyes as he found it hard to express himself. To show his gratitude for being rescued, Unos chose to find something that could aid his survival later on. He rummaged through Lizelle's belongings and discovered a potion and a sword. Diara was stunned and pleaded with Unos not to take the sword. She urged him to choose anything else but that. Unos struggled to understand her because of the language difference. When he saw that the humans were Cacaeans, he recalled the flag he had raised before and realized it was best to leave quickly. Diara attempted to stop him since the sword represented their team's identity, but Uno just walked off with it. Diara realized then that monsters would always behave like monsters. She promised to keep pursuing Unos as long as he had the sword. He still didn't get her, and believed she was just being noisy and bothersome. Seeing her anger, he hurriedly walked away. Still, he couldn't shake off the thought of how lovely Diara's melons looked. It was a shame they would never see each other again. Once more, this oblivious main character set off another warning sign. That night, Unos was filled with remorse for what he had done. The sword he had taken was actually a unique magic sword. It required magical energy to activate its unique powers and was quite costly. The sword could injure him, but his rapid healing ability swiftly repaired any harm. Ununos understood that the sword was very expensive, and he recognized that he had messed up. He had just wanted to befriend Diara, but now everything had gone horribly wrong. He felt like there was no way out. Meanwhile, Lena turned to Diara and asked if she was truly certain about going alone. Diara vowed to retrieve their sword and asked Lena to be patient. With tears in her eyes, Lena embraced her tightly. She worried that Diara could meet the same fate as her brother and Gista. Diara didn't want to invite Lena along because she feared for her safety and didn't want her to suffer or perish. Instead, she assured Lena that she would not end up like the others. Diara struggled to find the right way to say sorry, but she made a choice deep down. If Lena let her fear of dying stop her, Diara would take a different path. She promised herself she would catch Unos. Ununos was exploring his limits with hunger and tiredness. He thought he might not really feel them, yet he continued to challenge himself regardless. To top it off, the backpack he took from Diara's group, stuffed with potions, was on the verge of breaking. He understood he needed a larger bag and some salt to enhance his cooking. While he pondered, he recognized there were many things he desired. He made up his mind to look for them when he reached a town. At sunrise, he reached a deserted town. As he wandered around, he spotted some anti-aircraft guns. The Feudic Empire took great pride in these weapons, which could swiftly defeat flying beasts. Yet, they also sparked conflicts with neighboring nations, as the creatures often sought refuge in those territories. The town lacked high walls but was equipped with plenty of anti-aircraft guns. Yunus concluded it must be an inner town. He looked at the worn signs nearby and understood he was in the northeastern section of a place called Kuel. From this point, he had two choices: travel northwest to Luke Dill, close to Canaan, or head east to the old military base at Carnes. At least he was aware of his location now. As Ununis was ready to keep exploring, a terrible smell hit him from nearby. He instantly knew it was the odor of goblins and wished they would vanish for good. He tossed aside his backpack and dashed toward the smell. The goblins, occupied with tossing a skull back and forth, stopped in their tracks, wide-eyed, as a huge creature rushed toward them. Yunus charged at them with great intensity, giving them no opportunity to defend themselves. Amid the turmoil, he spotted a group of goblins fleeing together in the same direction. This was strange because goblins usually ran away when they were in danger. Ununos figured out that there was something up ahead they were trying to get to. As he prepared to attack once more, he saw the goblins moving together in an unusual manner. This led him to think that someone or something was directing them. They appeared to be protecting something. As Yunus glanced around, he noticed a school campus close by. He thought the big gym might be their secret spot. Unos hurried onto the campus, the smell getting worse with every step. When he walked into the gym, he was immediately confronted by a huge, overweight female goblin. It let out a sharp scream, surprised by his unexpected entrance. Unos soon identified the being as the Goblin Queen. Goblins occasionally mated with other races, but the queen was mainly responsible for most of the breeding. He saw that more than 20 goblins were born every day, and they grew up in just 20 days. As long as the Goblin Queen was alive, the number of goblins would continue to increase. Understanding this, Unos chose to wipe out everything around him. The goblins closed in, clearly aiming to defend their queen. Noticing their distress, Unos realized how much they cared for her. Yet their attempts were useless against him. He pressed on with his assault, defeating nearly all the goblins until just a handful, and the queen remained. As he faced the Goblin Queen, Unos paused for a moment. He kept his distance from them. They had a really awful smell. Unos chose to take down the goblins from a distance. The goblins looked puzzled as they saw him gather stones from the ground. He could toss them from far away, but he wasn't sure about his accuracy. However, since his target was big, he thought it wouldn't be too difficult. He tossed the first stone like a pro, but it veered off and struck the Goblin Queen's left shoulder instead. Unos felt let down since he had been aiming for her head. Determined not to quit, he recalibrated his throw and hurled another stone at her stomach. This time, it struck just right. The stone struck the Goblin Queen, leaving the other goblins stunned and unable to assist her. Ultimately, the Goblin Queen was defeated. Ununos was pleased with himself for stopping her and protecting future victims, like the lovely elves he pictured in his mind. But then he noticed he smelled terrible from being around so many goblins and thought about finding a river to clean up. After discovering a river and washing up, Unos felt rejuvenated in both body and mind. He chose to wander around, hoping to uncover something intriguing in a town this big. As he strolled around, his face brightened with joy. He had found a shopping mall. He couldn't contain his excitement. Ununos headed right to the sports area and discovered a large backpack. In the kitchen area, he picked up a cast iron grill. From the home gadgets aisle, he chose a cooler box. He finally went to the grocery aisle and grabbed some old salt, canned goods, and beverages. Ununos collected everything he needed to feel like he had returned to a lively world. He nearly overlooked checking the news about the Empire. Just joking. He didn't forget at all. As he walked, he grabbed a few magazines and newspapers. After 200 years, he noticed that many things had deteriorated. He soon realized that the Empire was in deep trouble. The elves of Einhell had taken over the Western Front. What was even more disturbing for Unos was that he couldn't find any updates after May 25, 1667. The final pieces he came across mentioned the Empire deploying their strongest weapon. Yunus, a loyal fan of the Empire, couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling these articles stirred in him. Had his homeland truly been lost? The idea frightened him, but he realized he had to uncover the truth. To achieve that, he would have to go to the imperial capital. Ununos took a deep breath and settled down, considering what to do next. He chose to visit Dill, a town close to the Canaan border, to check on how the kingdom was faring. He just had to get himself ready for whatever was ahead. A man was asked to investigate the goblin lair in Dill. A dignified man agreed to the request and instructed the team to manage it. He then looked at Orlando and inquired if he could take care of it. Orlando responded, advising the noble Arnell not to plead in that manner. He mentioned that he couldn't accept it simply because Argyle had shown him respect. Orlando said he had just brought new people onto his team, and this task would be great for them to learn. Still, he requested a bigger reward. Argyle accepted the request. Orlando then eagerly announced that his team, Akatsuki no So, would handle everything. The following day, a few goblins roamed through the woods. They had no idea that Ununos was close by, camouflaged like a tree. He waved to us and shared that he had used his skill to imitate. This let his large figure merge with the environment, helping him stay unnoticed. It wasn't the right moment for humor, so he hit the closest tree. Ununos understood he had to manage his powerful body when he felt angry. Using the limited words he had, he called the Empire science frightening. Still, he had to tread lightly. He didn't require sleep, yet the night before, he had rested soundly without even noticing it. He was likely just too tired. It felt similar to being hungry and then finally getting to eat. If he got too tired during the fight, he might find himself in a risky spot. Right now, he needed to be careful. Yuno quickly arrived at Dill, where the high castle walls confirmed it was the border town he sought. However, he spotted a few goblins darting out of the gates. He thought about whether they were battling the Canaan tribe. Since he had the power to mimic, Yunos chose to check out what was happening inside. He moved past the goblins as if they were bowling pins. Yunos slipped into the background like a whisper. He quickly noticed a bunch of people with red fabric on their right arms. He understood they were members of a famous unit from the Canaan army. Yunos saw around 50 people battling against 300 goblins. The humans were cornered, and Yunos worried it could end badly for them. When he spotted Orlando at the front of the group, he felt sure they could manage. Although Yunos didn't grasp what Orlando was saying, he could see that Orlando was skilled at directing others. He was good with a sword. To Yunos, it didn't seem special, but it was enough to fend off goblins. As Unos anticipated, the 300 goblins were swiftly defeated. He chose not to search through their remains since he couldn't stand the awful stench they left behind. He wished he had brought something along. Then the army's mage cast a spell to look for any survivors. A wave of magic swept through the space and touched Unos. He felt a tickle and noticed the mage gesturing towards him. Unos was amazed that magic was real and attempted to escape quietly, but Orlando commanded his soldiers to pursue the creature they had spotted. Unos swiftly jumped between the buildings, but the troops were hot on his trail. He became overly thrilled with his fake magic and failed to see how near they were. He wanted to avoid any trouble with the humans. The wizard swiftly recited a spell, and a towering wall of flames rose up before Unos. He halted in his tracks as Orlando shouted his name. Orlando aimed his sword at Unos, grinning confidently. Unos felt a surge of anger, believing Orlando was trying to taunt him. Although he wasn't eager to fight, he could feel anger rising within him. He wasn't sure if the others could take him on, but it was Orlando who threw down the gauntlet first. Unos got ready to fight and stood in front of the humans. Orlando was taken aback. He believed Unos was just another creature, but nothing could prepare him for what he saw now. His friend Annie remarked that the beast before them seemed menacing. Orlando admitted he was beginning to feel frightened. He recalled that Argyle hadn't given him enough money for this. He swiftly told the newcomers to move back, understanding that the creature before them was far more powerful. Noticing the frightened humans retreat, Ununos admired Orlando for making the smart choice. Unos felt joyful that he could give his all in the fight. Then, Orlando commanded the team to launch their attack. The mage and the archers let loose their arrows, but Ununos, striding toward them, appeared completely unfazed by their efforts. Orlando was stunned to witness the creature before them, shrugging off the attacks, halting their advance. The front line advanced and attempted to strike Unos with their swords and spears, but the weapons shattered and failed to harm him. Realizing the vanguards were ineffective against Unos, Orlando chose to take action himself. He noticed the monster seemed invincible, and his excitement surged. Unos was glad to see Orlando take the lead, as he was the one who initiated the battle. He admired Orlando's swift strikes, even with a bulky weapon. However, it wasn't quick enough for Unos, who effortlessly blocked Orlando's sword with his hands. Orlando and his crew were stunned when the sword suddenly halted. He sensed their spirits sinking and understood that the beast before them was genuinely frightening. When Annie spotted her leader in danger, she immediately ran to his aid. Ununos felt a thrill as he noticed a stunning blonde approaching, but he knew he had to block her path, so he attempted to halt her with a punch. Annie swiftly avoided his punch and bent down, catching him off guard. What shocked him even more was the crossbow she suddenly revealed. She shot the crossbow, and Ununos saw the arrow flying toward him in slow motion. Orlando and his team were left in stunned silence. Annie fell to the ground, shouting that Unos was a true monster. Unos loomed over her, biting down on the arrow and staring fiercely at them. Orlando noticed Unos getting ready to strike and rushed to assist Annie, but he was too late. Unos seized Annie as if she were a plaything. Annie struggled to escape, but it was no use. Unos could sense the strength in her physique. Judging by the way the melon sat on his thumb, he figured she was a size 4. To avoid causing her any pain, Unos chose to toss her a bit further. However, to his astonishment, Annie slipped out of his hold, leaving her clothes behind as she used a mysterious liquid to make her getaway, revealing her melons in the process. Unos stared at Annie's exposed curves in surprise and understood she was a size 5. Noticing Unos had stopped moving, Orlando shouted for a counterattack. They had to make the most of Annie's bold action. They swiftly closed in on Unos. Unos chose to let them off the hook for Annie's sake. As everyone charged at him, Unos swiftly disarmed or took them down one by one. He seemed to be relaxing now. Orlando jumped into the battle as well. As expected, Unos effortlessly stopped Orlando's sword with just his hands. While Orlando stood puzzled, Annie jumped in to join the fight. This time she drew a magical sword and slashed Unos on the chest. He winced in pain at first, but the injury swiftly mended and vanished. Annie felt defeated once more. When Orlando saw that the magic sword had failed, he understood they were in serious trouble. He realized they couldn't beat Unos. At that moment, all he could focus on was helping as many people as he could to get away. Although he attempted to be a distraction, he questioned how long he could keep those fierce monsters at bay. Then, unexpectedly, Unos raised his finger as if making a point in court. Everyone paused briefly. But then they saw Unos pointing at Orlando. This made Orlando realize that he could save them all by giving up his own life. He never expected this opportunity, but he swiftly ordered everyone to fall back. He explained that the creature wanted to battle him by himself. Moments ago, Unos recognized his error, transforming the battle into an unfair chase. He needed to make it right and had no option but to confront Orlando in a direct duel. Annie called Orlando foolish for believing he could succeed by himself. Orlando reassured her that everything would be okay and promised to buy her a great drink when they got home. He playfully warned her to cover up her melons, or his inner werewolf might come out. In tears, Annie called him a fool. Orlando said sorry, explaining he had no other option. He understood better than anyone that he couldn't outmatch Unos. It was obvious they had different skills, but as long as no one else was harmed, Orlando was indifferent. He didn't understand why Unos decided to challenge him, but he guessed he was the only one who matched what Unos was looking for. Additionally, he noticed Unos waiting. Clever creatures had been an issue before, but now they were proving to be useful. Orlando aimed to bring home as many of his team members as he could because that's what a good captain does. He was even willing to sacrifice his own life. Orlando said sorry to Unos for the delay. He then lifted his sword, and Unos got ready to fight. The air between them was charged, and everyone nearby could sense it. Annie felt anxious about Orlando. Unos acted first, and Orlando waited for the perfect chance to bring his sword down with force. However, Unos was faster this time. Orlando was helpless as Unos seized his arms. The others felt anxious watching Orlando being hoisted up like a defenseless kid. Determined not to surrender, Orlando managed to free his right arm from Unos's hold and made an effort to grab his other sword. As he glanced at his arm, he saw it was too hurt to hold the sword again. In that moment, he knew he had done all he could. Annie and the group shouted Orlando's name as Ununos opened his mouth wide, ready to bite his head off. But out of nowhere, Ununos spit Orlando out and flung him aside. Everyone, including Orlando, felt puzzled. As they saw Unos dash off, Orlando questioned whether he had upset him or if Unos had harmed him in some way. As the others moved away, Annie asked Orlando when he had last washed his hair. After a brief pause, Orlando realized it had been 3 years. Unos had been in the woods, feeling sick to his stomach. He was shocked by how dirty Orlando was and couldn't help but think about when he last cleaned his hair. He intended to fake an injury and escape, but he was caught off guard by the terrible odor. He vowed to take revenge on Orlando next time. Still, Ununos felt grateful to be alive and saw the melons as a pleasant surprise. He chose to venture deeper, but then he caught a whiff of something unusual, the smell of human blood. It was a little distance away, but his keen nose told him he could track it down. He chose to investigate. Unos found where the blood scent was coming from and paid his respects to the deceased. The injuries on the bodies didn't look like they were made by monsters, and their weapons and belongings were gone. Seeing a line of wagon tracks heading into the woods, Unos suspected that bandits were responsible for the attack. The thought of confronting those who had harmed and robbed others strangely excited him, as he felt he had a right to treat them the same way. As he followed the trail, Ununos soon found the bandits. His eager expression sent chills through the group. The bandit leader emerged from the carriage to investigate the commotion but let out a terrified scream at the sight of Unos's frightening look. The other bandits, filled with panic, ran away, and their leader hurried after them. Ununos was let down when no one wanted to challenge him, and he figured the carriage probably had nothing worth taking. However, when he peeked inside, he was taken aback to see 5 women without any clothes and boxes full of supplies. He stopped for a second, absorbing the scene and locking the image in his mind. A slight grin appeared on his face at the pleasant surprise. Ununos thought the women were likely being taken away to be sold as slaves. While he found the scene somewhat amusing, he remembered that he needed important supplies more than anything else. He thought it would be wiser to track down the fleeing bandits and find their hideout. After securing the carriage, he got ready to head out. The oldest woman, her voice barely a whisper, inquired if Unos had rescued them. As he was about to depart, he looked back at the women, etching their image firmly in his memory. His playful grin confused the women, but he had no plans to clarify. Ununos faced the path and started to sniff the air for the bandits. With his heightened sense of smell, he quickly picked up their scent. As he enjoyed his stronger body and keen senses, he quietly admired the Empire's advancements. He felt let down because he had lost 2 important things: his skill to express himself clearly and his mushroom. Moreover, he didn't require any weapons at all. Still, he held onto Lazelle's enchanted sword. Unos tucked his backpack away in some bushes close by and tracked the smell to a cave where the bandits were hiding. He activated his disguise skill and entered the cave. The cave seemed like a secret lair, but Unos thought it was odd that there was no guard at the entrance. He speculated that the bandits could be having a dispute with each other. The hallways were unexpectedly tidy at first, but then Unos stumbled upon a cell packed with skeletons and decaying corpses, including what appeared to be a mother and her child. The gruesome scene made Unos feel nauseous, and he understood that these bandits were beyond redemption. Out of nowhere, Unos heard cries of agony and despair close by. He listened as the bandits begged for forgiveness from their leader, only to be met with death moments later. Unos figured they were being punished for leaving the carriage behind, but he felt no sympathy for them as he heard their wails. Suddenly, a rough and eerie voice rang out in the surroundings. The leader was yelling at the thieves. Unos realized the leader was speaking Canaan, but his skills were lacking, which made Unos curious if he was from another country. The boss looked really angry, shouting at his team for fleeing at the sight of a terrifying monster. Ununos thought the bandits could be linked to a bigger crime organization operating nationwide. This meant there was a chance for him to gather plenty of treasure later. After a while, the shouting ceased, and Unos figured the boss had finished off his own crew. With fewer bandits around, Unos thought it was the right moment to take action. But the entrance was too narrow for him to fit through, and he was concerned about getting trapped. Having no other option, he rushed at the door like a quarterback, crashing through it and part of the wall. Despite that, he still took a moment to say sorry for barging in. What he found inside was not human at all. A frightening creature stared back at him. The being had a human-like upper body, but a spider-like lower half. Unos was taken aback when the creature spoke Fledos's language perfectly. The creature with spider-like features wanted to know who Unos was, claiming he was the beast that had taken his women. Unos stood frozen, puzzled, and struggling to understand what was happening. Suddenly, he realized that the being before him was just like him. They were both test soldiers made by the Empire. At the same time, Argale was taken aback to see Orlando looking neat and well-groomed for a change. Orlando saw how Argale was acting and inquired about the issue. Rather than responding, Argale asked when Orlando had last taken a bath. Orlando realized why he was asked and acknowledged that a lot had gone on lately. He shared that he had to tidy up after Annie and the others mocked him, claiming he smelled like a goblin. Orlando announced that they had successfully dealt with the goblins, but he also had some troubling news. He explained that they found a new kind of monster. Despite their teamwork, they couldn't damage it in the slightest. He mentioned that 7 of their men had fallen, leaving them utterly defeated. Orlando described the creature as having a human-like form, but being as big as an ogre. Its body was completely gray, and it had a tail. Their weapons and spells had no effect on it. The creature was not only powerful and resilient, but also fast and clever, making it the most dangerous type of monster. Orlando chuckled uneasily, feeling a chill run down his spine as he described what happened. Argale inquired whether Orlando's Titan Slayer weapon had been useful. Orlando confessed that he couldn't manage to hit the monster at all. While the situation seemed bleak, he acknowledged that it was the truth they had to confront. Argale asked what their next move should be, but Orlando turned the question around on him. He proposed that they would need a powerful magic sword and a skilled wizard to have any hope of success. Argale asked what would occur if the Night Order encountered such a beast. Orlando answered that they would surely be overpowered. The idea of reporting this gave Arnell a headache. Orlando pointed out that it was his duty to bring it up. Arnell told Orlando to take care of the new monster, but Orlando replied that it would rely on what he could do. Arnell sighed and noted that this new or changed monster might not be the only one out there. Frustrated, Orlando warned him not to tempt fate, stating that if more of those creatures showed up, they would be in big trouble. At the same time, the spider-like being continued to taunt Unos, hurling insults at him for just watching in silence. Unos was surprised to hear someone talking in his language. Looking at Spider-Man, he guessed they could be similar types of beings. Ununos attempted to clarify that he belonged to the same empire. However, the Spider-Man only perceived growls instead of speech. Understanding this, Unos chose to express himself by writing on the ground. But when he attempted to lift his hand, he found he was unable to do so. He was utterly trapped. When he looked more closely, he noticed he was caught in clear strings. The Spider-Man cautioned him to stay still, unless given the go-ahead. Ununos was curious about when the webs had been wrapped around him. Spider-Man started venting his anger about his disappointments. He was frustrated with his team's mistakes and was smashing their lifeless forms. He appeared upset about losing his impressive mushroom. His comments showed a harsh side as he talked about being unkind to another mother and son for his own entertainment. Unos recalled the mother and child he spotted among the prisoners and began to connect the dots about Spider-Man's terrifying deeds. While the spider-like figure anxiously searched for a place to conceal his next victim, Unos sprang into action with an unexpected strike. The Spider-Man narrowly avoided the strong punch, and Unos realized why he was so upset. He had also lost his mushroom and the ones he cared about. The person in front of him was anything but good. Unos decided he would take him down right then and there. Spider-Man was taken aback when a monster effortlessly ripped through his webs. From this, Unos figured that Spider-Man didn't know they were both part of a soldier experiment. Understanding that Spider-Man might get ready for an attack again, Ununos chose to be careful. For the moment, he maintained his distance and focused on getting rid of the webs. He then took one of the defeated bandits to gather them. When he noticed the amount of thread, Unos understood that Spider-Man had set them up in advance. Spider-Man had grumbled about the monster's intelligence, but he was shocked that it dared to confront him. Unos then cleverly used the bandit's body, tangled in webbing, to divert Spider-Man's attention. He attempted to seize its head and crush it to finish the battle. Although he caught hold of Spider-Man, it swiftly slipped away from him. To Unos' shock, the Spider-Man molted to escape. Even more troubling, the slime left from the molting was like acid. Unos dropped to his knees, racked with pain, while Spider-Man chuckled and sprayed him with venom. The toxic liquid soaked Unos, and Spider-Man's laughter grew louder as he walked away, believing Unos would not survive. In that instant, Unos understood just how lethal the poison was. His body was starting to feel numb, and he knew it could take his life if he didn't move quickly. He suddenly recalled the potion he had gotten from Diara. Unsure if it would be effective, he decided it was worth a shot. Even though he felt weak, Ununos was able to step out of the cave and retrieve the potion from the backpack he had placed outside. He applied the potion to his wounded arm, wishing for a positive outcome. Gradually, the pain and numbness started to disappear. Soon enough, he was completely better. Even though his body was in rough condition, with bones showing through his skin, Unos understood the value of potions and felt grateful to Diara. He had taken them from her, but Ununos was not scared for his life. Instead, he was alarmed because it was the first time he had truly experienced pain since waking up. It was a serious matter, and he couldn't bear the thought of the spider-like creature using that same power on humans. He understood that there might be more people suffering like those he had encountered before. Unos didn't want to be a hero, but he couldn't stand by while innocent women were hurt. He was a cultured man, and he refused to let a monster take that away from him. He didn't need any justification to confront the creature. Uno quickly realized that he felt better. The ache and tingling were gone. His keen nose brought back the creature's smell, and he realized who the spider was after next. Meanwhile, Spider-Man sat on a tree branch, keeping an eye on a carriage passing by beneath him. Behind the wheel was the stunning woman Ununos had rescued earlier. She had captured Spider-Man's interest. It chose her as its next target. But before claiming what it desired, it thought about how to inflict pain on her. Out of nowhere, his plans were disrupted by a noise from a nearby tree. He looked back and spotted Unos with a handful of stones. He was shocked that the monster was still breathing. As Unos began hurling rocks, he had to move out of the way fast. He felt frustrated with Yunus, worried that his target might get away at this pace. It also bothered him that Yunus stayed far back, knowing the threat from his threads. He was shocked that a basic monster was becoming cleverer. At the same time, Unos gathered more stones and noticed that his aim had gotten better because of his experiences with the goblins. He needed to halt Spider-Man from pursuing the carriage for the moment. The women required some time to escape safely. This had turned into more than just a battle. It was a challenge of stamina between him and Spider-Man. Spider-Man got frustrated and chose to strike head-on. Seeing this, Unos swiftly leaped back to put some space between them. Spider-Man grew more annoyed and yelled at Unos to stop running. In reply, Unos began throwing more stones, but Spider-Man skillfully avoided each one. Unos continued to back away, keeping just out of reach while Spider-Man attempted to get close for a fight. Annoyed by Unos' tactics, Spider-Man eventually lost his cool and disappeared in an instant. He came back above Unos, trying to hit him with poison once more. Unos saw this coming and figured that the Spider-Man would probably pull back as soon as he avoided the poison. Unos timed his move just right, evading the attack and seizing a nearby tree. With a swift motion, he swung around it and quickly moved to a different spot, keeping a safe distance. Unos anticipated Spider-Man's actions perfectly. He intended to move closer if Spider-Man stepped back and to withdraw if Spider-Man came forward. He planned to use the trees around him to mess up Spider-Man's webs. If he got the chance, he would pull up a tree and throw it at Spider-Man. The plan was easy to understand and could be done again whenever necessary. Annoyed, Spider-Man urged Unos to play by the rules. Unos wasn't interested in hearing anything, especially from someone he saw as a wrongdoer. This wasn't really a fight at all. It was a pursuit. For days, Unos relentlessly followed Spider-Man, always staying right on his tail. After a few days, Spider-Man felt totally exhausted. He had no idea how long it had been. It seemed like ages since he first faced Unos. He couldn't figure out why he was trapped with such a being, or how Unos had managed to trap him like this. Fatigue swirled in his mind. He felt drained because Unos had prevented him from eating or resting. Additionally, he was unable to spin his threads any longer. Out of nowhere, a rock came flying and smashed into one of his legs, causing him significant harm. Oddly, he felt the pain now, which left him puzzled. He questioned why someone like him had to endure so much, being treated like a test subject. Upset, he yelled in anger and rushed at Unos. Before he could reach him, more stones came flying, smashing his other legs. Unos was like a talented pitcher on the mound. Spider-Man fell to the ground, powerless to get back up. He attempted to crawl away, sobbing in agony like a hungry child. Unos approached, seized him by the neck, and ripped his human upper body from his spider-like lower half. The Spider-Man yelled and twisted in pain. Unos picked him up like a damaged toy and walked toward a tree. He pressed Spider-Man's face hard against the tree trunk and began to carve something into the bark. Spider-Man, wincing from the pain, caught sight of the scratches. His eyes grew large when he saw that Unos was writing in Furtos. It struck him like a bolt. Unos was just like him, another soldier created for experiments. The Spider-Man got scared and started pleading for mercy, claiming they were alike and should be allies. Before he could continue, Unos smashed his head, ending his voice for good. Uno remained still, reflecting that he could never be associated with someone like that. Days later, our lovable monster hero stood on a cliff, gazing out like Mufasa. You might be surprised to learn that Unos had already arrived in the elven land of the Einhell Republic. He said sorry to the audience for keeping them waiting for the elf arc. You may be curious about what happened with Unos' mission in Canaan. He handled that as well. After beating the spider monster, he made his way to the city on the front lines between Canaan and Einhell. When he got there, he noticed that Canaan had given up on high-tech gear. Instead of using modern weapons, they were relying on basic ballistas. In Einhell, the community honored nature and prioritized limited growth. As a result, the monster population continued to increase. This wasn't a major concern for the powerful elves, but it posed a serious challenge for humans. The cities on the front lines were expected to have modern weapons to defend against the monsters, yet they were still relying on ballistas, the same tools used 2 centuries ago. Unos felt let down by Canaan, as he had hoped for better from them. He chose to head to his regular lookout point. 2 weeks had passed since he came to the land of the elves, and he had discovered much about them. The women were stunningly beautiful, but there were men as well. Unos learned that elves were skilled in magic. Unlike humans, they could cast spells without speaking or using any chants. Additionally, they could use magic without limits and with impressive strength, which Unos felt was unfair. The elves relied on magic for daily chores, such as starting fires, lifting objects, and even washing clothes. Their frequent use of magic made them very skilled at it. But the true threat of elves wasn't their magical abilities. Uno quickly arrived at his lookout point and questioned whether the moment had come. Suddenly, the biggest danger showed up. Elves were truly adorable and stunning. He had heard about their good looks, but seeing them up close made him realize they were something special. This came from someone who had met more than 100 elven women face to face. Yunus was exploring the area to study this risky group. After watching for a while, Yunus chose to head to his next observation point. At this new location, he turned on his improved vision. He spotted Miss Elf number 6, who had arrived to bathe with a group of elven kids. Yunus found her fascinating and sensed she might be the real danger. She was a teacher who took the kids along with her wherever she went. Naturally, the nickname Number 6 was one that Unos had given her. It was thrilling to see everything so close, but watching her clothes stick to her skin was a whole different experience. With his zoom feature, Yunus could see every detail clearly, which made it even more powerful. The kids got noisy, and Ununos realized it was the perfect moment. They started messing around with the clothes of Miss Elf number 6. She was kind-hearted, making her an easy target for their schemes, which encouraged the boys' behavior. Ununos thought it was ridiculous, but secretly wished the boys would step it up. In the end, the boys got in trouble. As Miss Elf number 6 took the kids away, Unos complimented her, as he often did, and congratulated the boys on their efforts. Suddenly, Unos sensed a strong presence. Two massive forces were close by. Unos was taken aback when number 8 showed up sooner than he thought. He hadn't gotten a moment to relax and started to sweat with anxiety. Unos was drawn to the 8th elf because her presence was striking. She was so prominent that she always had 2 helpers by her side, indicating her important status in the land. If she were the queen, things would get really messy. But it looked like there was a good reason for her to keep her eyes shut. Her bathing routine was more ceremonial than that of the other elves. It was obvious she was unique, and the intrigue surrounding her set her apart. Unos had to pay close attention and not let a single moment slip by. She was truly one of the most frightening creatures. Even though his mind was buzzing with excitement, Unos felt empty in the basement. He recalled that he was powerless to act. Even though a tasty meal was right in front of him, he remembered how Spider-Man had shouted in anger about his lost mushroom. Spider-Man's comments made Unos realize that his own mushroom was missing as well. He also recalled how talented Spider-Man was with his powers. Unos thought about how the loneliness Spider-Man experienced might have piled up and pushed him over the edge. Unos felt a wave of sympathy for someone like him. He even wondered if he might find himself in the same situation one day. After bidding farewell to number 8, Unos suddenly felt at peace. He appreciated the feature that kept his feelings in check, preventing him from getting lost in dark thoughts. As the afternoon wore on, Unos chose to spend the time collecting supplies and tackling his tasks. Understanding that the elves stayed away from the river after dark, Unos bled a deer he had caught, sliced some of the meat, and cooked it up. As he thought, it tasted plain without any salt. After finishing his dinner, he settled down for the night. He turned onto his side and attempted to sleep, but couldn't find comfort. He propped himself up, pondering the existence of Spider-Man. He understood that he could discover more people like him in the Empire's capital, but Unos had additional motives for heading there as well. He always felt destined to go back to the Imperial capital, but he was unsure. He realized the Empire had become a vast forest filled with ruins and creatures, and that time had frozen on May 2nd. He knew what had befallen the Empire, but he was reluctant to accept it. He still held on to the hope that the Empire might survive in another place. Though his hope was small, he worried he might end up as shattered as Spider-Man. For now, he kept himself occupied by observing the elves from a distance. Yet, inside, he realized he was simply dodging the truth. It was tougher than he had imagined. Eventually, Unos chose to head to the Imperial capital. The following morning, he loaded his belongings into his backpack. He headed to his favorite cliff to bid farewell to the elves. Meanwhile, number 6 was enjoying a bath. Unos paused for a second, then understood that deciding to leave was a hard decision. Please, just hurry and get going. Diara recalled a memory from her childhood. An elderly man had told her that to become a great wizard, she must strip away her clothes. Although she was reluctant, Diara felt she had to follow through. She longed to return home and be with her parents. When she finally got back to her village, it was all in ruins and everyone was missing. Diara jolted awake, struggling for breath and drenched in sweat. It had been a terrible dream, the worst she had ever experienced. As Diara strolled through the streets of Recall in the Kingdom of Canaan, a woman's words echoed in her mind. The woman led a team of 5 women that Unos had rescued earlier. She informed Diara that she had already given the guard some information, but any additional details would come with a price. Diara paused for a moment but then handed over a silver coin. The woman praised her kindness and inquired about her questions. Diara requested every bit of information the woman had, no matter how minor. The woman replied that she couldn't provide much for just a silver coin. If Diara was fine with it, she had something to tell. The woman revealed that she and a few others had been taken and were being taken to the bandits' secret location. Things took a turn for the worse when a strange gray monster showed up and created havoc. She recounted how the bandits fled in terror at the sight of the beast. The woman realized the reason after witnessing the monster firsthand. Diara inquired about the monster's assault on the carriage, but the woman had no answers. She mentioned that the creature appeared to be rummaging through the carriage as if it was searching for something, yet it didn't harm anyone. After watching them for a bit, the creature dashed away. It returned briefly to observe them again before departing without any harm. The woman thought the creature was fixated on their looks, particularly their breasts, as she believed it was a common belief that such beings are drawn to women. Eventually, they were let go, but they stayed alert as they headed home. The woman then remarked on Diara's beauty and complimented her shape. She even suggested that Diara take a well-paying job at a brothel. Diara wasn't certain if that was a compliment, but she hoped to reach out to the woman for assistance later on. As Diara stepped out of the brothel, she noticed the monster nearing Canaan's borders. She walked past a group of young adventurers discussing how to use their hard-earned cash. Diara paused briefly, sensing a connection with them. She recalled her own journey of becoming an apprentice at the young age of 8. Her mentor favored young girls, and even though she had a gift for magic, it felt like that was the only reason he chose her. He wanted to possess her. Although others were kind, she lost her innocence. Nevertheless, she continued to work hard until she grew into a mature adult. When she came back to her hometown, she discovered it ruined by creatures. The scene broke her heart. She turned into an adventurer, chasing monsters without rest, facing life-threatening situations nearly every day. Sometimes she was let down and wounded by other adventurers, but none of that seemed to matter anymore. What drove her forward was her strong will to defeat every monster out there. In those challenging moments, Diara encountered the sisters, Rhea and Lizelle. They asked her to be part of their group, and it was the first time Diara had ever accepted. Later on, Gista, who usually worked with the siblings, officially became a member of the team. Diara thought she could walk away whenever she wanted, but after facing tough times, happy moments, and many risky challenges together, her feelings began to change. On one mission, even when Lizelle seemed close to collapse, he managed to defeat an ogre and earned a magical sword as a prize. Gista couldn't believe they had made it through, while Lena, tending to his wounds, urged him to stay silent. Lizelle inquired about what to do with the sword. Diara proposed that Lizelle, as their leader, should accept it and prove himself deserving. This short-lived group had genuinely turned into a true home for Diara. Monsters, as usual, snatched away those she loved. The sword, Ununos, showed that she and her team had a home together. Diara vowed to reclaim it at all costs and promised to be by Lena's side again. She wished for Lena to wait for her with patience. Hunos strolled through the remnants of an ancient site, clearly marked by the scars of battle. He had departed from Einhell and was making his way southeast to the imperial capital as fast as possible. When the sun went down, he arrived at the old ruins. From where it was situated, he thought it might be the town of Adris, but it was difficult to be sure since it appeared so dilapidated. Unos suspected that the elves were using their magic. After secretly observing them for 2 weeks, he believed they should owe him something in return. Although he flashed a thumbs up like a politician, he received no response, so he continued on. As night descended, Ununos felt no fatigue and kept sprinting. While he sprinted aimlessly, a tall building came into view, and he recognized it. Approaching it, he understood it was the Shubaru Iron Tower. It was tilted but remained upright after centuries. The Empire's technology was remarkable. Unos recalled the times he went to the tower with his family. He paused for a bit, wrapped up in the fond memories of those special moments. A bunch of goblins showed up out of nowhere, spotting Unos for wandering into their territory. Ununos had sensed them approaching, their foul odor lingering in the air. He was surprised by the number of goblins he saw and started to think that a goblin queen might be among them. A grin spread across his face as he realized it was the ideal moment to let out some pent-up anger. He stared fiercely at the goblins, causing them to tremble in terror. When the sun came up, the ground was littered with bits of goblins and their blood. Everything lay still around them. They had all become heaps of fallen bodies. In the middle of the arena, the goblin queen was lifeless, encircled by the still forms of her young. At the same time, Ununos was on his way to a different place. He spent more time than he planned handling the goblins, but he was nearing the town of Ayaga. With his improved eyesight, he realized the town was in worse condition than he had imagined. As he approached, an odd sensation about the town began to stir within him. Every place he had seen before was lush and green, but Ayaga was shrouded in dull gray ash. This led Ununos to think that something strange had occurred. His instincts had proven correct until now. The people there appeared completely scorched. He questioned whether the elves were responsible, but even in a conflict, they wouldn't destroy everything so completely. Unos had a feeling about this right from the start. He recalled an article he read on May 2nd, the final day of the Empire, which discussed the powerful weapon. Despite his reluctance to accept it, Ununos realized the Empire could indeed be responsible for such destruction, especially after witnessing Aiga's transformation into a desolate wasteland. He suspected that the ultimate weapon had been unleashed after all. He understood that he needed some time off because he hadn't had a moment to relax since departing from Einhell and dealing with the goblins. However, he was also aware that he had to reach the capital fast to verify something important. Yuno abruptly halted and gazed at what lay ahead. He was aware of it all along, but he hesitated to face the truth due to his connections with the Empire. The solution was there all along. Before him lay a giant crater, clearly formed by a powerful blast. Yunos leaped into the crater and touched the sand for the first time. He had never visited the beach, but he wondered if this sand felt similar. Yunos surveyed the bottom of the crater, pondering how many explosives would be needed to create such a massive hole. He finally grasped why Kanan had turned away from science. The pit below him showed the power of technology. As a survivor of the Empire, Yunos felt a strong urge to discover what had become of his homeland. He wondered if the Empire's choices had been wrong. Anger bubbled up within him, and he unleashed a fearsome roar. Within 2 days, Ununos returned to Ainhell, keeping a close eye on the elves. He watched them with a discerning gaze, yet still took a moment to greet you, our valued audience. As he anticipated, his homeland, the Empire, lay in ruins. Even more troubling, it was their own actions that led to its downfall. At that moment, Ununos had no choice but to look into the biggest danger on the continent, the elves and their real nature. True to his cultured self, Unos dedicated his time to learning about the everyday lives of the elves. Inside, Unos realized he was dodging the truth. He thought about the possibility that someone from the Empire was still out there, developing technology that could restore his humanity. His hope crumbled when he witnessed the devastation from the powerful weapon. Although Unos didn't dislike his present state, he longed to be human again. He feared being a monster, cut off from others. Even with the weight of his worries, watching the elves wash, especially the eighth one, brought him comfort and lifted his spirits. With the help of the elves, Unos was able to stay sane. He began to consider that if he couldn't turn back into a human, it might be easier to embrace his existence as a monster. He had witnessed the consequences for those who resisted their destiny. Over time, Unos came to understand that he was okay with his way of life. Despite turning into a monster, Unos still held onto a glimmer of hope. He discovered little moments to savor his humanity, even in his changed form. What was most important to him now was making the most of his life. Still, there was one thing that always let him down: food. Whenever he had meat, he longed for salt since everything else was flavorless. The salt he discovered in the kingdom was awful, leaving him no choice but to take it from others. Unwillingly, he chose to go against his own principle of not stealing. He swiftly decided to fetch salt from Canaan. With that plan in place, Unos, transformed into a monster, set off on his journey to Canaan. In Canaan, Orlando appeared worried. One of his team members shot him a harsh look and criticized him for lacking basic reading and writing skills. Orlando believed that just knowing how to write his name was sufficient. His team member noted that while everyone else was putting in effort and studying, their captain wasn't doing anything to get better. With little time left, Edward stepped up to read the report for Orlando. Orlando expressed his gratitude, trying to keep it lighthearted. But Edward felt irritated and had the urge to punch him for it. Orlando discovered that a goblin settlement had just been destroyed. At first, Edward found the news hard to accept, but his disbelief changed after he faced a new kind of monster. They both understood it was the creature's fault. Back then, the monster Unos was labeled as a disaster-level threat since it hadn't caused any significant damage yet. Orlando thought Unos should be seen as a bigger danger. Just by observing the creature, it was obvious he could do more damage than anyone realized. Orlando expected that the reward for Unos would rise if things got worse, and he promised that their team would be the ones to seize it. Edward was taken aback by Orlando's enthusiasm and joked that he looked like he had dollar signs on his face. He also advised Orlando to manage his fiery nature. Orlando hesitated but acknowledged they still required the cash. Edward then brought up that their finances had taken a hit after purchasing a big stock of weapons to battle the monster. Upon hearing this, Orlando proposed bringing in new team members for training. He was pleased with the quality of the weapons but pointed out that they needed more mages, as their team lacked magical support. Edward mentioned that it was tough to locate talented mages. Even the kingdom of Caesarea had a hard time finding capable ones. Orlando nodded in agreement but joked that he wished a skilled and eager mage would knock on their door. He also teased about wanting the mage to have a curvy figure. Edward grinned and hinted that he might tell Annie about what was said, causing Orlando to feel anxious. He hurriedly questioned why Annie's name had come up at all. Edward playfully nudged him, bringing up a 2,000-year-old bottle of wine at the tavern that could help him forget. Feeling cornered, Orlando hesitantly agreed to buy Edward the pricey wine. Just then, Annie entered and caught part of the chat. She eagerly asked if Orlando was picking up the tab for everyone. Before long, the rest of the team chimed in, placing their orders after listening to Annie. Orlando felt a rush of anxiety as he tried to intervene, reminding them to stay within their budget. Edward chuckled, believing that Orlando got what was coming to him for being lazy. Yuno stood by, casually observing a group of nervous men. Before them lay the bodies of adventurers in pools of blood. Even though he didn't grasp their language, it was obvious that the men, probably bandits, were filled with fear at the sight of him. He had just reached Canaan when he was shocked to see a merchant caravan under attack by robbers. From what he could tell, the loud ones were likely the robbers, while the lifeless bodies belonged to the coachmen and guards. He looked at a fallen female explorer and felt a pang of sympathy for her fate. As he looked more closely, he saw that she had a small frame and some items around her that looked like padding. He understood that she had likely gone through a lot and quietly wished for her peace. Out of nowhere, he realized he was under attack. But the bandits' weapons couldn't break through his strong skin. He was taken aback by their lack of skill, charging at him head-on instead of sneaking up on him. He couldn't help but think if their leader was just as silly as a goblin. Realizing they were definitely thieves, Yunos chose to act decisively. He swung his arm swiftly, smashing one bandit's head with a single hit. The terrifying scene made the other bandits flee in fear, but it was too late. Unos couldn't hold back and let all his power loose. He stabbed one bandit with his arm and then went after the others. With a strong kick, he hit another bandit, his blow cutting right through the man's body. The final survivor fell to the ground in fear, sobbing and losing control as Yunos neared with a threatening presence. Yunos remembered his teacher's words about the importance of instilling fear in others. Nodding in agreement, he took out the last bandit with a quick kick, smashing his head. Strangely, the teacher he recalled wasn't genuine. She was just an actress from a borrowed DVD. Once things calmed down, Yunos glanced around and understood he had crossed a line once more. Although he had battled bandits, they were still people. Unos appeared indifferent. After all, bandits were individuals who hurt others. From Canaan's perspective, they ought to appreciate Ununos for sparing them the hassle of a trial for the bandits. At this moment, Yunos anticipated a reward for handling the bandit situation. He watched the merchant's caravan, eager to discover treasure, particularly salt. When he looked inside, he stumbled upon something surprising. More people gathered. They yelled in terror at the sight of him. Yunos was beaming by the river nearby. He had finally discovered what he had been searching for. There were 2 containers of salt. He had been living on just dried meat for a long time. Now with salt, he could make his meals much better. Even with all the wagons, the treasure was underwhelming. Besides the salt, he discovered some wool to wrap the delicate jars and an ornate water jug. The jug seemed precious with its intricate design, and Yunos wished it had magical powers. Yet, despite all his efforts, nothing occurred. He considered using it as a normal water jug, but there was a hole in the bottom. Unos figured it might have once been part of a fountain. Sadly, it was of no help to him at all. So he chose to throw it out. He settled down and began to consider his future plans. He chose to return to the mall to find sturdier jars for the salt, as the ones he had might still shatter despite the wool padding. Lately, he had been making trips between the Empire, Canaan, and Einhell. Since he was taking the same route repeatedly, he figured it would be wiser to establish a base in the Empire. After thinking it over, he saw it was a great plan. By gathering supplies, he could create a main hub, and it would surely pay off. Above all, his inner child was thrilled by the thought of creating a secret hideout. He always had a taste for adventure. He chose to set up the base close to Einhell and Canaan. The town of Idris, or a nearby spot, looked like an ideal option. Yunos was filled with excitement and eagerly anticipated the morning. When dawn broke, he set off on his journey home, carefully holding the jars of salt. As he approached Idris, he spotted something strange in the environment, colors that seemed out of place. He was intrigued and thought it might be an artifact. The trees obstructed his sight, making it difficult to utilize his sharp vision effectively. He chose to inch closer to take a look. He moved ahead quietly and activated his improved vision once more. He stopped dead in his tracks. A shiver went through him as he understood what he was seeing. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead as he realized he couldn't escape what was coming. Yuno faced a massive structure. As he had suspected before, they resembled the spot where he had initially regained consciousness. He made an effort to avoid dwelling on it. This was where his nightmare began. Now that he had rediscovered it, he realized he couldn't simply turn his back. He decided to investigate the building and learn more. Meanwhile, far away at Karnash Fortress, once ruled by the Empire, Diara sighed heavily. She was shocked that they were really launching an attack on a goblin fortress. This stronghold had once been owned by Canaan, but the Empire had held it for a long time. This was no typical fortress. As she surveyed her surroundings, old, painful memories flooded her mind. She recalled how all her teammates, except Lena, had been taken out. That moment stuck with her, and she couldn't shake it off. The main reason she hesitated to accept this mission was her reluctance. She only said yes because the pay was substantial. She held Yunus responsible for everything. Once he relocated to Canaan, she found herself completely broke. Once he crossed the border, a man shouted to Diara, asking her price for the night. She sighed in frustration, feeling irritated and thinking that all men were the same. Rather than responding to him directly, she turned and indicated that the Goblin Queen was right nearby. If he had any requests, he could handle them there. The man was left bewildered and at a loss for words. Close by, another man was astonished that anyone would dare challenge a mage from Kenoshita. He was even more shocked to learn that De'Ara was from Syria. In Caesarea, the Kinoshita and Itsu families were famous for their strength. Having the privilege of carrying those names showed a person's true strength. The first man considered himself fortunate that he wasn't set on fire for his disrespectful remark. Yet, the second man claimed he got it. He found it hard to overlook Diara's stunning looks and figure. That strange moment brought the two strangers together, creating a bond that felt like brotherhood. The next morning, during the battle, the man who had disrespected De'Ara lost his life in the fight. As the assault started, the mages launched fireballs at the fortress. Unlike the rest, De'Ara conjured a massive fireball that wiped out a whole group of goblins in a single blow. Her strength amazed everyone, especially since she had already defeated 100 foes on her own. They weren't shocked, though, as it was expected that someone from Kenosha would be far more powerful than ordinary mages. Diara didn't appreciate being called that name. It brought back memories of her former master, a person she really couldn't stand. After using up all her magic, she said she was exhausted and needed to rest. Orlando, who was close by, expressed his gratitude for her efforts and offered her a warm smile. Not long after, as Diara took a break, she heard knights shouting at the mercenaries. Orland mentioned that it was unavoidable he had run out of magic. The knight commander kept grumbling about how unreliable mercenaries were. Diara recalled that a knight from the nearby army was assigned to keep an eye on them, which was part of why she hesitated to take the job in the first place. The task would have been simpler if they had just burned the fortress down. However, the nobles planned to reuse it, so they instructed everyone to limit the destruction. This is why De'Ara had a dislike for nobles. They never put themselves in danger, yet they were always the first to voice their complaints. She saw the knights retreating and realized the goblins were nearly beaten. She just wished those creatures didn't have any leftover weapons from the old empire. Once the outer walls fell, everything changed fast. When the gate swung open and the reinforcements arrived, only the Goblin Queen and a handful of her followers remained. Orland swiftly defeated the queen. Diara watched as the creature's legs shattered, making it an easy target for arrows. It didn't take long before it was done for. What was expected to be a fierce fight resulted in just 5 fatalities and 65 injuries. The fortress remained mostly intact, and the mission was completed. It was a definite victory. The knight commander chuckled, believing the Lord would be pleased and that it was all due to his excellent guidance. Diara was frustrated. That night, the commander just held everyone back. At that moment, Orlando shouted to Diara, complimenting her impressive performance. Diara assumed he was like other guys and turned away from him, but Orlando quickly clarified that he wasn't referring to anything of that sort. He was talking about her job. Diara inquired about what he meant. He introduced himself as the head of Daybreak Battlefield, and Lloyd shared his name too. Orlando shared his desire to bring Diara on board. He thought she was already aware of the buzz surrounding a new type of monster. He confessed that he had a past with that creature. He thought his team might soon be tasked with eliminating it, but they lacked enough skilled mages. Their group was limited, and their spellcasters lacked power. He mentioned that someone like De'Ara could make a big difference. Diara's expression changed to one of seriousness as she requested additional details. When Unos came back, he was taken aback to find the gate standing open. When he entered, he noticed areas of the building with holes that seemed to have been burned by something very hot. He also observed that the elevator was damaged and didn't descend much at all. As he scanned the area, he spotted some fine threads close by. It dawned on him that this was the origin of the spider-like figure. Unos continued his descent into the basement. Ahead of him, another gate stood wide open. He was surprised when he heard a faint sound. It seemed like something was still functioning. He was surprised to find the generator still working. He couldn't understand why the gate hadn't been opened earlier. It looked like the door only swung open when someone was heading out. He hurried over to see what was going on. He was correct in his assumption. The facility operated hydro generators that were fueled by underground groundwater. As a result, one of the machines still had power, making the data it provided reliable. Unos was amazed. It really seemed like something the Empire would create, but much of the gear was already in disrepair. The machine indicated they wouldn't survive beyond 300 days. He couldn't change the situation at the moment. However, he considered finding a way to make the generator last longer in the future. The roof of the place was sturdy, and being below ground kept harmful creatures out. Best of all, Unos could still access some electricity, even if it was just a small amount. It was perfect for a hidden base. He chose this spot to be the fortress of his empire. He quickly put most of his things in the storage room. Next, he needed to head back to Alquel to gather a few more supplies. First, Ununos returned to the elves to recharge his energy. He saw that the elven kids were mischief-making once more during bath time. They hatched a goofy scheme. A few of them kept the older elf girl busy with a fish, while someone else attempted to tug at her clothes. She tried to reprimand them, but they knocked her down, and one of the kids pulled her clothes into the water. The children erupted in laughter as the elf girl requested her clothes back. Unos was clearly amused, especially when he spotted number 6 in her birthday suit. He began to eagerly anticipate the next prank the kids would devise. Seeing the elves like this made Ununos realize they were not so different from humans. Coming from the Empire, he couldn't shake off his mixed emotions about it. He believed that forming a strong bond with the elves could be a wise move. After all, elves had long lifespans. If he approached them, he could uncover the truth about what occurred 200 years ago. However, there was a single issue. He wouldn't make much progress without grasping their language. Still, he decided to take his time. He just wanted to take in the scenery. Back in the capital of the Canaan Kingdom, Argale was buried under a mountain of papers on his desk. While he was concentrating, there was a knock at the door. He let them enter. Marcus, the leader of the Golden Amber mercenary group, sensed Arnali's foul mood even from outside. Argale shared that a new directive had been given to remove an unusual species. The task would be a collaboration with the local military. Marcus felt no shock. He had seen this coming. He recalled stories about a new creature. It only struck merchant caravans, but oddly enough, it focused solely on the bandits that accompanied them. Marcus thought it was premature for the kingdom to choose complete destruction. Argale felt the choice stemmed from arrogance. The monster took a copy of the ocean's water source. This copy was meant to represent a new town being created in the south. Argale was puzzled about why they had to battle an unfamiliar creature for such a vague reason. There was hardly any information available about it. He thought the kingdom was indifferent to the mercenaries' lives. He mentioned that it could have been fine if there was a big reward, but if they succeeded, the army would take all the glory. If it didn't work out, the mercenaries would take the fall. He felt angry and couldn't understand how such injustice was occurring in the nation. Marcus advised him not to be too hard on himself. He mentioned that Arnali had done his best. Marcus stated that his team, Golden Amber, would not join the mission. He was unconcerned about his own fate, but he wouldn't put the younger members in danger. Arnali mentioned he would act the same way if he were in Marcus's shoes. He wished that other teams would also consider holding back if they could. Marcus recalled that Daybreak Battlefield had to participate. They were the only team that had already faced the monster. If Orlando from Daybreak left, Grant from the mercenary team at Movable would probably follow. He usually rivaled Orlando, so he wouldn't sit on the sidelines. Marcus felt at ease about Grant's abilities since he was quite talented. He mentioned that as people age, they usually become more careful. He playfully thought about naming it the Whispers of the Earth. Although he hadn't laid eyes on the creature himself, he felt it was part of a realm that humans were never meant to enter. It felt like something they shouldn't even attempt to confront. Not long after, Eunice was awakened by the voice of elf number 6, summoning him in the morning. She was watching over Eunice's baby while he napped. For a brief moment, Unos felt a rush of happiness. He felt joy at reuniting with his partner, but that feeling was short-lived. It was only a brief dream. When he finally woke up, he looked at his body and saw that there was still nothing between his legs. He saw that coming. The day before, he had sprinted as quickly as possible to Airquill. He was so exhausted that he went to bed right away, skipping everything else. It was the first time he had ever felt this level of fatigue. He took extra time exploring the buildings and discovered several everyday items. He even came across some electrical appliances that were in working condition. He was surprised to find a big TV that was still in great shape. Ununos had always loved watching movies on a screen that size. He remained uncertain whether the data discs were functioning. As he explored the area, he discovered a video camera as well. This sparked his imagination about the scenes he could capture and cherish forever. But soon, more troubling thoughts began to creep in. He recalled that sneaking a look at others and recording them without their consent were illegal acts. Yet, a part of him insisted that laws no longer mattered, so it was okay. Yet another voice in his mind told him that misusing these creations for evil was still wrong. Eunice understood there were boundaries he should never cross. However, since he no longer viewed himself as human, he felt those boundaries no longer mattered to him. He asked the elves to hold on, promising that the Empire's tech would dazzle once more in clear detail. He looked through the catalog and discovered a newer version with zoom and plenty of added features. After looking through the shelves and even the storage areas, he discovered it was unavailable. He had to choose another option instead. He decided to head to Java, a spot famous for its electronics. The distance didn't bother him at all. He was ready to run as far as necessary. He also brought along the TV and a DVD player. Driven by his curiosity, he hurried back to his base to prepare everything, paying no attention to the goblins he encountered. Unos soon reached Jizva. He believed it would be pointless to come all this way and find nothing. As he scanned the area, he noticed a big orc's body dangling from a traffic light. Immediately, he realized it was a warning to keep people out of the area. Out of nowhere, a creature lunged at him from behind, but Unos easily defended himself. The creature took a step back. As he focused more closely, he saw it was a crimson ogre. This version was much cleverer and tougher than regular ogres. Ununos realized it would be a big issue if this beast appeared while he was still searching for the camera. He concentrated on the battle, deliberately provoking the ogre to stir its anger. The ogre rushed at him. Ununos managed to block the punch, but the force still knocked him backward. It was the first time he encountered someone with such incredible power. Rather than feeling afraid, he felt a rush of excitement. He had been eager to battle a tough opponent up close. Unos attempted to defend himself, but the ogre landed a fierce uppercut. For a brief moment, he was taken aback. The ogre seized the opportunity to strike harder, making Unos an easy target. The ogre attempted to end the battle with a powerful kick, but Unos blocked it effortlessly with one arm and seized its leg. In that instant, he understood this was more than just a contest. It was a battle where only one could emerge victorious. He smashed the creature's leg and wished it wouldn't seek revenge. He landed a powerful punch to the body and quickly followed with a flurry of quick right jabs, all while keeping its leg pinned down. The ogre bled heavily and began to cough up blood. Unos finally released his grip and the creature fell to the ground. As he stepped on it, the ogre pleaded for mercy, but Unos brought his foot down hard, ending the battle once and for all. He thought the ogre was to blame for its own troubles, and no reason could alter that view. Despite getting injured during the battle, he recovered swiftly. At that instant, Ununos believed he could truly claim the title of the strongest creature on land. With future worries behind him, it was time to search for a high-quality camera. He entered the electronics shop and immediately found what he was looking for. He lifted the video camera and twirled around with joy. To be cautious, he purchased 2 identical models and grabbed 50 blank discs for recording. With that, his filming gear was all set. While he was in the store, he thought he would look at some movie discs. He strolled through the video aisle, scanning various titles, but one area of the store really grabbed his attention, a part with a sign that reads 18 and older. Unos stayed silent. He slipped through the curtains, as if something was drawing him in. By the time he finished shopping, Ununos had picked up 2 video cameras, 50 blank discs, 3 standard movies, and a big stack of adult films, all with subtitles. He later told us that his favorite gravure idol had recently moved into that type of job. He also said he was only checking the discs to see if they really functioned. He believed the genre was unimportant. He was eager to start watching immediately, but reminded himself to take his time. He needed to focus entirely on the actresses, but first, it was time to grab a bite. After the meat was thoroughly cooked, Uno added a dash of Canaan salt on top. He arranged the food neatly on the plates he chose earlier. His signature dish, Uno-style deer steak, was all set. Although it was just basic grilled meat, he took a bite and joyfully remarked that the salt made it delicious. He thought that adding spices to mask the odor could improve it even more next time. Once Unos finished eating, he cleaned the dishes. If the audience was really watching, they would have seen that the location had both power and running water. Unos was used to getting water from the river, so having it available at the tap felt like a huge improvement. Then, the main event began. Unos sat in front of the TV linked to the disc player. The time he had been anticipating had finally come. His hands trembled more than normal as he grasped a disc. The cover featured a woman with a prominent chest. He gently put the disc into the player, wishing it would play. Unfortunately, the TV just displayed noisy static. Unos wasn't shocked because he thought some of the discs might be faulty after all this time. However, he remained determined. He experimented with different discs, particularly those showcasing his beloved grave model, but each one displayed the same loud screen. Nothing was successful. He even tried a disc featuring foreign women with big chests on the cover, but that didn't work either. That's when Unos understood something even more troubling. The video cameras were damaged too. Strangely, one of them was still powered on and began to record. Unos hurriedly grabbed the disc he had just recorded and attempted to play it on the TV, but all he got was a screen full of static once more. At that moment, he let out a heart-wrenching scream, even louder than when the red ogre had struck him earlier. He was shocked that the discs had vanished after 200 years. It also amazed him that the Empire's technology couldn't keep something so basic intact. Perhaps it wasn't the discs after all. Maybe the issue lay with the player itself. Ununos considered going back to Ariel right away, but he froze when he saw a disc cover featuring blonde women with large breasts. An idea suddenly struck him. He was eager to test out a different disc player soon. Perhaps someday, he could record and actually view those adult videos. A tiny glimmer of hope sparked within him. He realized that if he let go of that hope, he could lose his sanity. For the moment, he decided to take a break. Someday, when he felt strong enough to face even the hardest moments, he would surely look for a new disc player. That night, Unos enjoyed a calm dream. In it, elves 6 and 8 sported small bikinis and giggled as they played on a bright beach. It was a happy dream, yet it held a subtle sorrow. Ununos had faced many challenges in the past, but he understood that he couldn't remain unhappy forever. Hoping to improve his life, he returned to the Canaan highway to gather some free salts. Upon arrival, he spotted 3 wagons stuck in place and saw evidence that people had been nearby. With the wagons trapped, he knew it was time to take action. This time, he didn't bother to conceal himself from the humans, even without his camouflage skills. A few men suddenly took off with a functioning wagon. Unos was taken aback. Their sudden departure felt unusual, yet strangely invigorating. He couldn't quite grasp it, but it seemed genuine in some way. He chose to look through the other wagons for anything valuable. One of the bags contained dried meat, but it had an odd smell, reminiscent of chemicals. At that moment, he understood it was a setup. Just then, the troops from the Canaan Kingdom arrived. They had even more hired soldiers with them. He estimated there were about 500 people altogether. Ununos suspected this could occur since he frequently attacked Canaan, but he didn't anticipate it would happen so quickly. He started to consider his options. Fleeing wasn't the answer since constantly running away wouldn't fix anything. It would only prolong the issue. He still had several options. He could either play it safe at the start and battle later, or dive in and eliminate as many as possible right away. Regardless of his choice, the nobles of Canaan would be outraged. He realized that getting around Canaan would be a lot tougher now. People would be more cautious, and there would be fewer wagons on the roads. Unos paused to gather his thoughts. Suddenly, the local army leader started laughing at him for getting caught in their scheme. He vowed that Ununos would come to regret turning against them. When Unos heard this, he became furious and rose to his feet. He understood he would handle his unexpected feelings later, but for now, he chose to confront them head-on, just as they wished. The archers appeared anxious, yet the commander commanded them to shoot regardless. Sadly for them, their arrows did nothing. They simply ricocheted off Unos's body without causing any harm. He thought this was the moment they would call in their hired help. Before long, a man on a horse came into view. Unos saw the man wielding a halberd and wished for a tough battle. The rider rushed in without hesitation. Ununos quickly realized the man aimed to strike, flee, and then cast a spell. Before he could get away, Unos seized the halberd firmly. To his astonishment, the rider immediately dropped his weapon and released his horse. This took Ununos by surprise. Suddenly, a shower of fireballs fell around him. As they burst, the nearby knights erupted in cheers, believing they had triumphed, but Ununos stood untouched. He noticed that the mages lacked strength and skill. As he got ready to act, he found that the halberd had vanished from his grip. The rider somehow summoned it back and swung it directly at Unos's face. This time, the blade succeeded in slicing him. Unos was taken aback. He suspected the weapon was magical and could find its way back to its owner on its own. He thought the idea was intriguing. Unos prepared to battle earnestly and retaliated. The rider grinned, clearly relishing the fight. Unos anticipated that response. Many mercenaries enjoyed battle. When they saw their leader in action, the rest eagerly jumped in to fight. Unos knew it was time to stop the battle and walk away. He aimed a punch at the rider, but the man skillfully flipped back and avoided it. Unos felt a spark of admiration for him. However, he had no intention of allowing him to get away. As the rider attempted to defend against Unos's next strike, he was struck fiercely, hit the ground hard, and spat out blood. Unos scanned the area, curious about who might confront him next, as he intended to pursue them himself. The knight commander, furious, labeled the mercenaries as worthless and commanded the archers and mages to encircle Unos and take him down. Just as Unos felt the chaos of a true battlefield, he heard a voice he recognized calling to him. Orlando arrived with his crew, remarking that it had been some time since they last met. Just seeing Orlando again made Ununos tremble. The last battle had marked him, hurting him physically and mentally. Frustration took over, and he charged at Orlando in a fit of rage. Orlando effortlessly avoided all his strikes, leaving Ununos astonished. He realized that Orlando had picked up some skills from their previous fight. Rather than trying to block, He shifted his attention to dodging blows. Ununos felt a hint of admiration, yet he vowed to himself that he would score a hit, no matter what. Just as he was about to approach, a fireball suddenly appeared and struck him from the side. It didn't cause any pain, but it left him bewildered and unable to move. Orlando saw an opportunity to attack, but quickly hesitated when Unos tilted his head oddly. That slight motion surprised Unos. He had always thought that mages were weak, but this time, he was tricked into lowering his defenses. A powerful figure lurked behind the mages. Orlando continued his assault, urging Unos to concentrate on him. More sword fighters entered the fray. Unos began to feel irritated. It was getting really tough to battle the mage along with all these new foes at the same time. Suddenly, the knight commander called out for the archers to prepare. The hired soldiers got scared and fled. Ununos watched the knights and felt they were acting silly. From his position, it was obvious that the knights and mercenaries were not cooperating. As arrows whizzed past him, Unos saw someone dashing right through the chaos. It was the fifth beauty, the untamed blonde he had encountered earlier. He figured she should realize that enchanted swords had no effect on him. She grinned and tossed something in his direction. Unos swiftly dodged, fearing it could be toxic. Suddenly, a huge fireball shot towards him. Surprised, Unos quickly swatted it to the ground. Everyone, even the wizard who performed the magic, was taken aback. Unos remained frozen, working to steady his nerves. The soldiers were stunned by what they had just witnessed. They began to question whether they could actually succeed. How could a guy unleash such a strong spell from nowhere? Unos felt a chill run down his spine. That kind of magic could have really harmed him. He suspected it was from the same wizard who had attacked before. For the first time with his new body, he felt a rush of excitement. A grin spread across his face. He took a strong stance and stared down the knights, prepared to unleash his full strength. He wanted them to come at him as if their lives were on the line. The mere glance in his eyes sent shivers down the knights' spines. Without hesitation, they dashed off in all directions, fleeing for their safety. Uno felt a wave of sadness wash over him. He had been looking forward to an actual battle, but they were already throwing in the towel. He let out a thunderous roar. A few knights were so scared that they almost lost control and shouted for their mothers. The commander yelled for them to get back to their spots, but it didn't help. Unos dismissed the Canaan army as useless. A handful of daring knights attempted to resist. The local knight leader moved in, but Unos quickly took them down. He asked them to quit acting like knights. That was enough. Every single soldier fled as quickly as they could. That marked the downfall of the Canaan army. The mercenaries were the only ones remaining. Diara sighed deeply within the circle of mages. Then, Ununos pursued the mercenaries, and Orlando informed his team that he would take the lead. Fireballs shot toward Unos, but he remained unfazed. Orlando charged at him, swinging a massive sword. Ununos sidestepped the blow and landed a punch. Orlando unexpectedly deflected the punch with his sword. The other mercenaries attempted to close in on Unos, but he noticed their approach. He took them out one by one with ease. Even Orlando was beaten. As the mercenaries fell to the ground, Unos questioned if it was truly finished. He had restrained himself during the battle, so he thought that many of them would make it through. Those who missed out were likely just unfortunate. Out of nowhere, a massive crystal hurtled toward him. The loud bang resonated throughout the battlefield. A nearby female mage was panting after unleashing her strong spell. Fortunately, Unos intercepted the crystal just in time. If it had struck him head-on, it could have caused him significant harm. He was taken aback that anyone still had the strength for such a powerful strike. His gaze fell on the group of mages, and he spotted one woman who caught his attention. Her invisibility had worn off, probably because she had exhausted her strength. Ununos chose to approach her and look at her face. Orlando could only stand by as Unos walked toward Diara. Ununos removed her hat, and Diara swiftly attempted to strike his neck, but Unos was quick and grabbed her with his strong hands. He was taken aback that she still had one last move. As she fought against his hold, he saw how her chest rose and fell with every struggle. For a brief second, he lost focus and couldn't grasp her words. He nudged her once more, and her body's response drew his eye. He sensed that something was wrong. As he examined her more carefully, he recognized that he had encountered her previously. The two mountains in front of him were the same ones he had spotted in Chapter 2. It all clicked into place. This was the same wizard, Diara. Diara glared at him, filled with anger and revulsion. Inside a church in Caesarea, Lena kept praying. A deep and unsettling sensation lingered within her, refusing to fade. She hoped her big brother and Gista would protect Diara from danger. Unfortunately, her worries came true. At that instant, Ununo held Diara firmly in his grip, like a doll. She struggled to escape from him. Ununos couldn't recall her face, but when he noticed her chest and heard her voice in the Caesarean language, he was certain. She was the same person he had known before. He referred to her as his first Opie son. He believed the only reason she had stayed with him this long was that he possessed something she desired. Still, he felt he had repaid her. Earlier, he had used a potion she gave him, which kept him alive. He thought that was fair. Noticing the knight's laziness and indifference, Yuno decided to take Diara further into the forest. The knights were relieved they no longer had to battle, especially since it was only for one female mercenary. They stepped back and asked the other mercenaries to handle the rest of the fight. They even claimed that the mercenaries were mostly ineffective. Orlando was at a loss for words. He was too stunned to fight back. Diara kept shouting at Ununos to release her. She believed he was either going to devour her for real or in another way. The idea of being harmed by a creature terrified her, so she kept resisting, urging Unos to just end her life instead. She claimed she would never yield to him, yet she paused briefly, feeling uncertain. As Unos carefully set her down, Diara considered seizing the chance to strike while he rummaged through his bag. To her astonishment, he suddenly knelt before her and offered the sword she had been looking for. He made a gentle, soothing noise that felt safe. Diara was in shock, but she still grabbed the sword. Her hands trembled as she hugged it to her chest, gripping it firmly. Then, Eunice decided to walk away and give her some space. As she saw him go, Diara experienced a swirl of feelings. She felt anger bubbling up again and yelled that humans weren't toys for him to use. That evening, Eunice sat by a tiny campfire. He found his mind drifting back to Diara, not to her face, but to the image of her bare chest. He recalled how she had insisted on staying uncovered, even in the end, and he felt an odd respect for her determination. Yet, he questioned if she felt anything like that for him. It was only at that moment he realized it. People would never welcome someone like him. He knew this well since he had been human once. The day was eventful, but as he reflected on it, it felt more like just a good exercise session than an actual fight. Referring to it as a battle seemed excessive. His strength had surpassed what people could handle. Despite this, he still held a tiny hope of being able to live among them, even as a creature they feared. He questioned whether that kind of future could really happen. The idea stirred up a mix of feelings within him. His calm ability gradually eased his thoughts. He rubbed his head and realized it was time for a meal. Following that battle, his danger level would quickly escalate. Kanan would boost security measures, causing trade to come to a halt. He had to stay away from the city for a bit. However, information traveled slowly, and this mix-up might turn into a great opportunity for him. He was excited for morning to arrive so he could take one final trip to earn some money. With that in mind, he settled down and drifted off to sleep. Diara held her friend's sword tightly against her chest. Lloyd instructed the others to load the seriously injured onto the wagons, while those with minor injuries needed to stay vigilant. Beauty number 5 visited Orlando. As he rested against a tree, Orlando said he felt better than those in the wagon. Lloyd remarked that the casualties were fewer than expected and felt they had performed admirably. Orlando chuckled softly. He claimed that Lloyd was more intelligent and should have been aware of the situation. Then he became serious and mentioned that they were just being played with. The operation involved 557 individuals. Among them, 456 sustained injuries, and 18 were confirmed deceased. This odd ratio revealed that the new kind of monster wasn't even bothered by them. Still, the Knights of the territory insisted that their hard work was the reason for the result, and the Lord backed them up. As Argyle had dreaded, the Mercenary Guild took the fall for the failure. The Lord declared that the group known as Dawn's Battlefield would face consequences for concealing information during their battle with the new type of monster, which was seen as a grave error. Argyle yelled in frustration and hit the table. He had already warned them that the monster wielded a magical sword and was very clever. He shared all his knowledge with them. Because there hadn't been any significant wars since the Great War with the Empire, the Mercenary Guild's influence had declined. The guild agreed to government oversight to stay in existence, and now Argyle lacked the power to defend the mercenaries. He felt pity for Orlando. Ultimately, another group of mercenaries disappeared. In the city of Lecter, part of the Canaan kingdom, Diara strolled through the streets, pondering the new type of creature. The more she pondered, the more confused she became. She questioned what that being really was. Their nation had faced creatures since long ago, and the study of these beings had expanded over the years. She thought she understood a great deal, but the new creature they encountered was unusual in every aspect. The creature recalled her from Orlando. She was curious if it could identify people by their looks and voices. She wasn't certain since she had only heard of such monsters in fairy tales. It felt more probable that there was something about them that the creature found strange. The mercenaries told her that Orlando made a big impact. However, she wondered why it had taken their magical sword. While pondering, she began to think that the fruit she had been carrying could be linked to it. She held the fruit in her hands, curious if this was what the creature desired. Just then, Orlando came over, and she saw Edward walking next to him. She told them it was pointless to stop her since she had already completed what she needed to do. Orlando said he was sorry and that he couldn't allow her to go home like that anymore. Meanwhile, in a different spot, a set of lizard-like eyes observed from the darkness. Lena kept praying for Diara. Diara punched Edward in the face. She insisted on hearing what he had just said. Edward calmly cleaned the blood from his nose and explained that they had been given a task to track down the giant viper. That was the specific task assigned to them as a consequence from Dawn's battlefield. He was worried about revealing to her that she was now involved with Dawn. If she attempted to back out of this task, she would be labeled a criminal for life. He knew she was eager to go home, but leaving Kanan at this moment would be really tough for her. Diara inquired about his idea of punishment. She described the creature as a walking catastrophe, stating that even at their strongest, they hardly had a chance against it. She believed this task was nearly a death wish. She also mentioned that the knights were the ones in charge and should take the blame. She wondered if they were truly going to remain silent while the knights tossed the mercenaries aside. Orlando rubbed his head and said he was sorry. He described how Kanan operated these days. Clenching his fist, he warned that if they tried to escape, the kingdom would pursue them relentlessly. It would only complicate matters for the other mercenaries. If both options ended in disaster, he preferred to confront the beast. He needed Diara's assistance. Diara understood she had to step in. She felt anxious about Lena, who was still back there. Meanwhile, Ununos was enjoying some meat. He was pleased because the flavor was nice, thanks to the black pepper he picked up in Kanan. It helped mask the strong, gamey taste. The small pepper grinder from the mall was tricky to handle with his large hands, but it was worth it. As a result, he enjoyed flavorful meat for 3 straight days. Eventually, he got fed up and began to long for vegetables. When he was human, he believed meat was all he required. After days of eating just that, he now craved vegetables more than anything else. He thought maybe his body was asking for some nutrients. He also believed it would be great to have some fruit. Since he still had sugar from Kanan, he could easily whip up a basic compost. He thought about getting fruits and vegetables and wondered if the elves could help him out. In this world, elves enjoyed a varied diet that included meat, so they weren't strict vegetarians. Still, battling elves for food seemed like a silly idea. It was too dangerous, and Caesarea's southern fields weren't a choice. Unos really didn't like the south. Because of that, Unos had to go back to Kanan. He wanted to stay under the radar a bit longer, but he felt he had to take action. He thought he could slip into a quiet farming village without anyone seeing him. Numerous outlaws were sent to remote rural areas as a form of punishment, so he felt no remorse about stirring up trouble. He had already committed to memory a few potential locations from a detailed map he had studied at the base. That place probably still had some valuable items, so he intended to hit it again when he could. Before moving on to his main goal, the empty area northeast of Emriade, he decided to spend a night at his elf lookout post. There was a cliff by the river that was perfect for observing from afar. Unos had a reason for being there. He was unsure of the location of the next supply point and desperately needed water. Additionally, he had been overlooking his watch duties for some time. His real drive in life had always been the view of breasts, which he found significant. Although it was still early, he thought he should go there regardless. Unos arrived at his favorite lookout and settled in, hoping to see someone show up. Hours went by, but no one appeared. He questioned what was going on and worked to soothe his nerves. He told himself that an imperial soldier needed to remain composed during times like these. He decided to spend another night. When the next day came, no elves showed up to wash in the river. Unos held on to his hope and chose to wait another day. When the next day came, however, not a single elf showed up. He figured something was wrong. He believed the elves might have seen him and decided to stop visiting. He still thought they wouldn't change their habits just because of one monster sighting. He started to wonder if something more serious was keeping them away. His curiosity increased, but he realized he couldn't act against the Einhjar. He figured his watching duties were paused until the elves resolved their problem. He reassured himself that this was just a short break and that he would reunite with those two again. For the moment, he had to collect vegetables and head back to Kanan. He eagerly anticipated munching on fresh vegetables, or at least that's what he told himself. However, he was feeling drained and sluggish. It took him longer than he thought to get moving. His initial target location was vacant, and the surroundings seemed abandoned. He was right about the farming village. As night fell, he decided to set up camp and continue his journey in the morning. Unfortunately, the next spot was also deserted. Unos took a deep breath to steady himself, aware that there were more potential locations close by. He focused on recalling the areas to the north and those beyond them. He also attempted to remember the places in the southeast. He felt let down that he couldn't jot down a note due to his large hands. His body was meant to be better, yet he struggled to hold a pen. He knew he had to overcome his awkwardness quickly. He chose to go southeast for the time being. Uno quickly arrived at a village, or what was left of one. It didn't seem broken. Although there were no people around, the area still felt like someone had been there. He thought the village had just been left behind. However, there were clear signs of damage. as if something massive had smashed through the place. He saw those same signs in the first village. They weren't caused by conflict. It was obviously the doing of a beast. What troubled him was that there were no broken fences and no clear signs of a struggle. Yunus switched to detective mode. He figured a monster had gotten close enough to attack without anyone seeing it, despite its size. With no blood or scent remaining, he thought it must have devoured everyone completely. He decided that a shadow viper was to blame. He recalled a huge snake that could imitate other creatures and thought about whether one was close by. If it came down to a fight, Ununos believed he could take it down. His tail wagged slightly when he spotted some vegetables, but the plants weren't ripe yet, and the rats had already plundered the storage. This village was a disappointment as well, leaving him no option but to trek over the northern mountains. As Unos walked on, he noticed the sound of footsteps nearby. He estimated there were around 20 people. He wondered if they could be survivors from the village. Despite his zoom features, the dense trees obscured his sight, so he decided to get nearer. As he moved ahead, he stumbled on a slope and lost his footing. He slid down and felt flustered. As he got back on his feet, he chuckled at his recent misfortunes and teased himself about not having enough charm. Then, he spotted some familiar faces. It was Orlando and his team of hired soldiers. Eunice was shocked to see familiar faces so far into the mountains. He questioned whether his good fortune had finally faded. Initially believing they were just villagers, he hadn't used his disguise ability. Orlando got ready to battle and grumbled that Eunice picked the worst moment to show up. Beauty number 5 suspected the creature was drawn to her because she still smelled like Orlando. Edward and the group nodded in agreement. Orlando took responsibility right away. Yuno noticed they were prepared to protect themselves, but they didn't seem eager to engage in a battle. He believed handling them would be exhausting. If they intended to escape, he would actually welcome that. Out of nowhere, someone asked them to hold on. It was Deara. She approached Ununos with confident strides. As he glanced at her chest, it clicked in his mind that she was the one with the enchanted sword. To his astonishment, Deara removed her top and revealed her breasts to him. Una stood frozen. He was caught off guard when she suddenly revealed her melons. After a brief pause, she wrapped up the display and adjusted her outfit. Eunice was curious about her actions. He considered that it could be her way of showing gratitude for getting the sword back, but he wasn't so sure. She had no reason to think a monster would grasp human etiquette. Then he understood that she likely figured out he only noticed her because of her big chest. He wanted to say sorry. Deara raised her staff and used the end to sketch on the ground. As Unos glanced down, he noticed an image of a snake. He thought about whether she was referring to a snake creature or the shadow viper. She waved her hands, first indicating herself, then the others, and finally him. At last, she poked the picture of the snake. She extended her hand to Unos, seeking his assistance. Edward felt puzzled and questioned if she had truly gone crazy. Unos realized she needed help to overcome the snake. He could tell how urgent her plea was as she turned to an unusual creature for assistance. She must have been in a tough spot. Or perhaps she hoped he would take care of the monster for her. He started to think about what he would get from this. Previously, he might have believed that assisting them could create a connection with people, but he had already let go of that thought. Orlando shouted in frustration, questioning if Deara had gone crazy for seeking help from the new species. Deara snapped back, telling him to shut up. Unos was amazed when he heard her speaking Canaanite. Deara mentioned she would do whatever it takes to return home. She kept her word to come back to Lena. Orlando had no response. Uno paused for a bit, wanting to know what he would get from helping, but all that came out was a low growl. He then plopped down and began rummaging through his backpack. Deara was puzzled as she observed him. He took out a bottle of blue liquid with one hand and raised his other hand to indicate the amount he wanted. Deara was stunned. Ununos asked for 5 bottles of the potion. She saw that he really got her, and now he was trying to make a deal. Ununos noticed her face went white, and he knew the reason behind it. Everyone thought monsters were mindless. So this moment changed her perspective completely. Deara inquired about the number of blue potions they had. Edward replied that there were 2. Bringing her own stock, she thought they had just 3 to give. She then turned to Eunice and placed 3 bottles on the ground. Eunice thought that was everything they had. He decided to dig deeper into his backpack and explore the trade options more. He pulled out a green potion and held up 2 fingers to signal his next request. Deara's expression lit up as she realized what he wanted, and she quickly drew 2 more bottles in the dirt to show she had them. Eunice smiled and lifted Deara effortlessly with his large hand. Orlando and the others stood still, stunned. Eunice softly lifted her onto his shoulder. Deara didn't push back, demonstrating her determination. Eunice discovered her true bravery. She nearly lost her balance on his shoulder, so she leaned in and moved closer to his head, unintentionally pressing her chest against his face. He saw her pause at first, but now he was sure she had become his number 7. Deara then told him to be careful, and Ununo sensed the serious atmosphere lift. She then leapt off his shoulder and informed Orlando that the deal was done. Orlando found it hard to accept that they had struck a bargain with a creature. He questioned whether they could really rely on anyone. Diara confessed she was unsure, but she was determined not to surrender and meet the end their foes desired. She was convinced that everyone shared her feelings. She decided it was the perfect moment to ambush those knights. With their powerful ally by their side, it was time to demonstrate their capabilities.